Hey, so remember 2 weeks ago when I made the video about the people not turning their headlights on at night? And I was noticing it all the time? Since I made that video, I haven't seen it happen once, so that's kind of weird. You think everyone saw that video? I'm assuming probably not, because I doubt it got many views, because none of them really get that many views. I guess the most logical answer for everything is that the world revolves around me. Roll the thing. Hey guys, Sean here. So I was going through the footage for day 2 of Wondercon and I realized that I thought that it was going to be one video, so I didn't shoot a "Hey guys, Sean here" thing at Wondercon. So I had to do it here. Yeah. So now let's go to me in the car talking about day 2 at the beginning of day 2. So let's go to that. Just go to that now. So it is day 2 of WonderCon. There's some panels I want to go to. The floor, I've pretty much seen all I wanted to see on the show floor, I guess. I mean, there could still be something I could possibly discover today. On the plus side, I got here early enough to get in the parking garage again. That's good, because at VidCon, I always get in the parking garage, because majority of the people that go to VidCon aren't old enough to drive yet. So the parking garage is always empty. But with WonderCon, the garage fills up pretty quickly, and then you have to go to Angel Stadium, which is about a mile away, and then get on a bus and come back over. Or you secretly park in the Toy Story parking lot at Disneyland and then just walk across the street. But that's kind of shady. Anyway, let's see what day 2 has in store for me. Oh yeah, also I forgot, a weird thing about the Anaheim Convention Center, the parking garage, they give out $2 bills a lot for change, and they're always like crisp and brand new. It's bizarre. I have one already from VidCon last year, and yeah, I don't understand what the deal is with the $2 bills that the Anaheim Convention Center just loves handing out in their parking garage. So I was going to go to the She-Ra panel, and then I looked at the schedule and realized that I had changed the plan, so I sat in there for a little bit because it was nice to be able to sit inside. I'm trying to block the sun. But I forgot that there was a Dungeons & Dragons panel that's going on roughly the same time, so that's where I'm heading to now. It was nice seeing all the She-Ra fans gathering up in there, because I watched a video about a week ago on YouTube that kind of gathered all of the videos of the better known white dudes who complain about things that aren't white duty, I guess would be the correct term for it. And they had done videos about complaining about the new She-Ra and how, well, essentially they couldn't look at the character design and masturbate to it. That's essentially what it broke down to. They were very off-put by the character design and how she didn't look like a statuesque supermodel like the original She-Ra did in the 80s. And they were very upset with the show because it wasn't made for them. It was made for, well, you know, the target audience of young girls. And we can't have that. We have to have everything be made for 40-year-old white men. And it just made me so angry to watch it. And then to get here today and to see all the young women and young girls in there all dressed up as She-Ra and all excited for this panel, it just made me even more angry, because it's like, why would you let this bother you so much? It's obviously not made for you. It's made for them. Let them have something. There's enough in the geek sphere for white males in their 40s. I know, because I'm almost one of them, so one less thing is not a big deal. In fact, there's too much stuff for white males in their 40s. I wish there were less. I don't have time for everything. Please, take away things. That'd be great. Anyway, heading off to the Dungeons & Dragons panel. So after shooting that little dealy bob, I went into the room, and let's see, what was the name of it? It was Welcome to the Golden Age of Dungeons & Dragons and Mass Media and Pop Culture was the name of the panel. And on this panel was Josh Bellina, who was a writer for Law & Order Special Victims Unit, Robert Hewitt Wolf, who was a writer for Andromeda, which was an old sci-fi show, and the Elementary show on CBS with Lucy Liu and whoever the guy is that plays Sherlock Holmes, Satine Phoenix, who is the community manager of Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons & Dragons, Mitch Iverson, who was the writer of the Voltron series that was on Netflix that I really loved, Tom DeSanto, who was the producer of the X-Men films and the Transformers films, and it was moderated by Anastasia Hunter, who she didn't really say who she was, and it doesn't really say what she did on the app. So essentially this was a panel talking about how Dungeons & Dragons has had this huge renaissance lately, and it's something that, yeah, I've definitely noticed, and all the people on the panel had been playing Dungeons & Dragons since the 80s, basically. And it was just like, wow, I can't believe it's reached this point that it has, where you have all these different shows. You have the streaming shows like Critical Role and Dice Camera Action, and all the shows that Satine Phoenix herself is a part of as a dungeon master. And then you have narrative shows that have things that are basically written around Dungeons & Dragons. Like Stranger Things is highly written around Dungeons & Dragons. And then you have other shows where it'll pop up every now and then, like on Voltron they had an entire episode that was Dungeons & Dragons based, and on Community they had an episode that was Dungeons & Dragons based, and just all sorts of pop cultural TV shows and stuff where it appears. And yeah, I totally agree. It's crazy how it has reached the point where it is, because in the 80s Dungeons & Dragons was like, the big thing that it's known for is the Satanic Panic, because people thought that it was teaching kids how to worship Satan, because there's like demons and stuff in it, because people are dumb. I'm sure there's still people that believe that, but definitely not as many anymore. And it has had this huge renaissance to the point where I would have liked to ask them what their teenage selves who were playing Dungeons & Dragons in the 80s, or their 20-something selves in the 90s, or however old they were at the time, if you had told them that someday you would be able to buy the Dungeons & Dragons starter set at Target, what would they think of that? Because the fact that you can buy the Dungeons & Dragons starter set at Target is ridiculous to someone who has known of Dungeons & Dragons since the 80s. And the fact that it has become so big that there's actually a business around luxury dice sets. But yeah, it's just so crazy how Dungeons & Dragons has become in the last just like 5 years. So after that, there was a spotlight panel on Jerry Dugan. Dugan? I'm guessing it's Duggan. It's Guggan. That would make the most sense, that it would be Duggan. Anyway, he's a writer for Marvel Comics. He is most well known for being the writer on Deadpool for the last like 5 years, maybe 4 years. He has the longest run as a writer on Deadpool in history. And I personally have read every Deadpool comic that he wrote, because when I started getting back into comics because of the Star Wars comics, I started getting Deadpool too. And so I've pretty much read all of the... He doesn't write Deadpool anymore, but all the ones that he did, I read them. So I went to his panel, and Mark Waid was 2 seats in front of me. Now, Mark Waid is... I should probably look this up before I say it. Okay, yeah, I made sure. I thought he was actually something that he wasn't, so I had to double check. He is a very prolific comic book writer and editor, and he used to be, I'm looking at it over here, the editor-in-chief and later chief creative officer for Boom Studios, who makes all of the Power Rangers comics now. From 2007 and 2010 is when he was that. And then, yeah, he's written a whole bunch for DC and Marvel, and he's just... When you name comic book writer, current day comic book writers, he's probably one of the top 10, if not top 5 names that you could come up with. So that was a really interesting panel to hear him talk about all the various books that he's worked on. And he's currently working on the Savage Avengers because recently Marvel got the comic book rights to Conan the Barbarian again. They used to have it well long ago because Conan is actually a novel. Conan's essentially like Tarzan, where he's started in books and then he's been moved to other media throughout the years. But yeah, Marvel got the comic book rights to Conan again, and they've actually brought him into the Marvel Universe continuity in the last few months. And they're starting a new book called Savage Avengers that has Conan and some other Marvel characters, including Dr. Voodoo and Wolverine and Elektra and probably Hulk. I think Hulk is on there. But that hasn't come out yet. But he did have the rough, uncolored copy of it on his iPad. And he was like, who wants to read Savage Avengers #1? You'd come up and do it. And so he has some panel was going on. He had people come up and sit right next to him and read Savage Avengers #1, which comes out like in 2 months. And as he was sitting there continuing with his panel, and then he'd ask them what they thought of it when they finished. So that was kind of cool. Next up was the big panel of the day, the only one that I really wanted to go to in the arena, and that was the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. panel. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was the first Marvel television series that took place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It followed the continuing adventures of Agent Coulson, who was killed off in the first Avengers movie, and it was supposed to be within the continuity of the movies, but that has always been a one-way street throughout the history of the show. The 7th season of the show will be starting on May 1st. They made the big announcement that it's coming back May 1st, and what I mean by it's always been a one-way street, it's the continuity of the movies have always dictated what happens in the TV show, but there has never really been any sort of continuity between what happens in the TV show and what happens in the movies. So it's almost like it's an alternate timeline sort of thing. And I'd say in the last few seasons, they've just kind of decided to go with that, to not really care as much what's going on in the movies. Although towards the end of last season, they were referencing what was going on in Avengers Infinity War. But what actually happened at the end of Infinity War, which was the big major thing that happened, that didn't affect Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. at all. Well, at least we don't know if it did, because one of the big things about the new season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is that normally they would come back in like November, and if they had done that, then they would have actually had to kind of address the big thing that happened in Infinity War. But since they're now going to be coming out after Avengers Endgame comes out and all of that is rectified, then they don't actually have to deal with it at all. So that's kind of their way of getting around it, is they're just like, well, we won't have any new episodes in between the two movies, because then we don't have to even deal with that at all. So there were two major things that happened during this panel. So number one, they brought out all the people that they normally do, the executive producers, some of the writers and all that, and then the stars of the show, all 100 of them, or however many there's like 7. So they brought out all the usuals, but then Ming-Na Wen, who plays Agent May, and Chloe Bennett, who plays Quake, were not there this time, and they're usually there. And then Clark Gregg, who plays Coulson, who's the main character, is usually not there. But this time, he was there. And so that was really like, whoa, Clark Gregg is actually here this time, because usually he's not, because he's usually having to work and stuff, because he's the most prolific of all of them. So they all came out, everyone was like, yay, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And then the Jeff Loeb, who's the head of Marvel Television, who was moderating the panel, he was like, so you want to see something from the first episode of the new season? And everyone was like, yay. And then he's like, how about we show you all of the first episode of the new season? And everyone was like, what? Oh, that's crazy. And he's like, okay, we will do that, but keep in mind, there are big scary looking dudes walking around in suits, and they're keeping an eye on every single one of you. and we will know if you are recording in any sort of way what you are about to see. And this panel was an hour and a half long, and I was only going to be able to stay for an hour because I wanted to get to another panel that was happening towards the tail end of this panel. So I was like, well, I guess I'm going to have to leave right as soon as this ends. Hopefully that's enough time. And luckily it was. Like, I was able to leave right as the episode ended and get to the next panel that I wanted to get to. But that was crazy that they just showed the entire first episode of the new season. Oh, and one other thing. Right before that panel, there was this annual tradition that they have where they will show trailers of all the upcoming super nerdy movies and TV shows for the year. And you can gather with all of your nerdy friends and watch them in a arena together, I guess. That's something that they do. And this worried me a little bit because I do not watch the trailers for Marvel movies anymore because Marvel movie trailers show way too much in them. Well, just movie trailers in general show too much in them these days. So I avoid, like, the big movies that I want to see. I avoid the trailers like the plague. And lo and behold, like, within the first 3 trailers, there was the Avengers Endgame trailer and the Spider-Man Far From Home trailer. So luckily, I had my Bluetooth headphones and I was able to put them on and crank the loudest Metallica song I could think of directly into my ear holes and just lower my hat to block the screen. And so I didn't see either one of those trailers, so that was good. But yeah, I will, when I see a Marvel movie, I will then go back and watch the trailers, and I'm just like, I can't believe they showed that in the trailer. Why do they show all these things in the trailer that just give away such major important parts of the movies? I don't know why they do that. All they need to do is just flash a Marvel logo on the screen and say, there's another one coming, and people will go. You don't need to show so much. It's the same with Star Wars. I don't watch Star Wars trailers either because why? I know I'm going to see it. I don't need to see a trailer to get hyped for it. I'm hyped for it. It's a Star Wars movie. And they show too much. I'd much rather just go not seeing anything. So next up were the 2 alpha panels, but they're not really alpha panels anymore. And what I mean by that, it was the Nerdist News panel and the Geek and Sundry panel. Nerdist News and Geek and Sundry were bought out by Legendary 5 years ago, 4 years ago, and then they were put under a banner called Alpha together, and last year, or no, actually earlier this year, maybe a month ago, Alpha shut down, so now they're just on their own on YouTube. They're still under Legendary, but the Alpha brand, which was essentially a paid website where you could see premium content from both of them, they shut it down. So now they're doing everything on YouTube now. So the Nerdist News panel, let's see, who was all on the Nerdist News panel? Do they have who all was on it? Okay, so yeah, Jessica Chobot was on it, who is the host of Nerdist News. It was moderated by Hector Navarro, who works on a lot of the Alpha shows. Well, it says Rachel Hine was on it, but she was not on it. Kyle Hill was on it, who does Because Science. Eliza Pearl, who is a writer, and Brian Compton, who is a producer. So they talked all about Nerdist News. They showed their usual blooper reel that they show every year. And it was a lot of fun. They had a Q&A like they always do. Everyone always has a Q&A. And Q&As are always cringy because comic book convention people are they're just awkward. And they're really awkward when they're asking questions. That's just how it is. What am I saying? It's not comic. It's anything that has an audience Q&A is always awkward. Audience Q&As just never work out the way that people think they're going to. So after that panel, there was the Geek and Sundry panel. Now, the Geek and Sundry panel was one that I was very interested in because it was called the Geek and Sundry State of the Sundry 2019. Now, the reason why this really mattered is because Critical Role, which I've mentioned too many times on this channel by this point, almost as much as I've mentioned Lindsey Sterling over the course of the existence of this channel, recently broke ties with Geek and Sundry. So Critical Role used to appear on the Geek and Sundry Twitch channel and YouTube channel, and then this year they broke off on their own, and they have their own Twitch channel and own YouTube channel now. So when Critical Role started, it was pretty much the driving force behind Geek and Sundry's Twitch channel becoming the most subscribed to Twitch channel for many years. And so I was very curious as to what this was gonna be about, because what is the state of Geek and Sundry without Critical Role now? Because it was such a huge component of that channel. And also without Alpha existing anymore, because a majority of the shows that were on Alpha were actually Geek and Sundry shows. So let me bring up the thing here. So this panel was hosted by Daryl Crittenden and Jake Bennett, who are the hosts of Asinine Wisdom, which is a show that was on the Geek and Sundry Twitch channel and then moved over to Alpha, and now I guess it's going to go back to the Twitch channel or the YouTube channel. And then Erica Ishii was on it, who I met last year at WonderCon, who is just a ball of positivity. That her and Trisha Hirschberger are like the two most positive people I've ever seen in anything and ever met. I'm looking at the list here, and I don't think all the people listed here were actually on the panel. So let me look at the video of the panel. Yeah, and then Amy Dallin, who is a on-camera person, does a lot of stuff for Geek and Sundry. And then Ivan Van Norman, who does a lot of GMing for stuff for Geek and Sundry. Geek and Sundry has actually turned more into a tabletop RPG channel overall, where most of their shows revolve around tabletop RPGs. So that was a really fun panel, and they showed a sizzle reel of what Geek and Sundry is and all that. And then they did something that I thought was brilliant. They had everyone line up for audience Q&A, and then they flipped the script. The panelists asked the people in line questions and had them answer them. So that was smart. Because then you don't get the awkward questions from the audience, although the panelists did have awkward questions too. So it didn't work out as well as it was meant to, but I thought that was a really clever idea, to have people line up and then have the panelists ask the audience questions instead of the other way around as normal. So after that, there was one last panel that I wanted to go to, and that was the Cartoon Voices panel. Let me see here. On this panel was John Bailey, who I had met the night before from Screen Junkies, Phil Lamar, who I had gone to the panel for the day before, Allison Packard, who has done voices on Tom and Jerry and Poppycat, Rachel Butera, who has done voices on the newer Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle and the newer Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and Jim Meskimen, who is probably the greatest impressionist living today, maybe ever. He's done Avengers Assemble, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He's done a bunch of stuff over the last 20 years or so. I remember that he played a teacher on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, so that's how long he's been in the business. Although he did show up a little late because he was having a hard time getting to the convention center. Oh, and then the moderator was Mark Evener, who puts this panel on every year for not just WonderCon, but he also puts it on for San Diego Comic-Con, and I went to that when I went to San Diego Comic-Con last year too. And he always, essentially it's the same panel, just with different people every time. So he will have questions that he asks them all, like, tell us about your best experience, tell us your worst experience, tell us about various things, like what you do, who you are, you know, all that. And then at the end of the panel, they do a table read, a cold reading of something. And it was, when I saw him at San Diego Comic-Con, it was Rapunzel. And again, here, it was Rapunzel. And so he will assign the various characters to different people on the panel, and then they will just read the script. And they're allowed to change the voices throughout whenever they want to. So when they were about to start, he was like, well, we need to fill Jim Meskimen's seat. So he knew that one of his friends, Wally Wingert, was in the audience, and so he's like, hey, you come up and fill that spot, and then also there might be something a little later that's a little special for you to do. So it was planned that he was going to come up the entire time because of what happened at the end of this cold read. So right as they were about to start, that's when Jim Meskimen showed up, and he ran up and he just jumped right in because he had the job of the narrator, and then he just, as they were going, the moderator guy would call out impressions for him to do the narration in. So they went through the entire thing, and then when it reached the point where they got married, they needed someone to be the pastor, and that's when he said, "So Wally, I believe that you have a special guest here to play the pastor for us." And he had brought up a white trash bag up on the stage, and he's like, "Yes, I do." And he reached in the white trash bag, and he pulled out Rolf the dog from the Muppets, because he's been doing the voice of Rolf the dog for I don't know how long. And suddenly Rolf the dog from the Muppets was on the panel, and everyone lost their freaking minds, because it was like, what is going on? As magical as it is to hear people who are voice actors do the voices that they're famous for, and you like see the person who's doing the voice, and it's like, oh wow, that's it, that person does that voice, and then you hear the voice coming out of them, and it's like, oh, this is crazy. To see a Muppet in person is 10 times more amazing, because not only are you getting the voice, you're getting the actual character themselves being brought to life right there. And that was just crazy. So just now, after saying all that, I'm like, wait, does he actually do the voice of Rolf the dog? Like, because if he was actually a Muppeteer, I don't know that he'd be allowed to just go around with a Rolf the dog puppet and just present him. Like, so I Googled it, and there's a video on YouTube following him around at WonderCon, and it says voice actor and Muppet fan Wally Ringert takes his Rolf the dog replica on a fun-filled walk through WonderCon 2019. So, yeah, he's not actually the voice of Rolf the dog anymore, because apparently after Jim Henson died, they retired Rolf completely, because Jim Henson was the voice of Rolf, and it was probably one of his favorite characters, and so out of respect for Jim Henson, they retired him. And so yeah, still it was magical. I'll actually go ahead and put a card to linking to this video so you can check it out if you want to, because it's still magical, because watching him walk around and interact with people on the show floor at WonderCon, people are so excited to see him, so there's that. So it's still magical. And while I'm at it, I'll link to a video of Jim Meskimen that he did for, I think, GQ like 3 years ago, where he's going through a whole bunch of impressions, so you can check that out as well. And just to be safe, I'll put them in the comments down below, because I've heard that not everyone gets the cards, so I'll put them in the links down below. So after that, I had no more panels to go to. There was still an hour of the show floor open, so I'm like, I should probably go walk the show floor one more time, because I hadn't stepped foot on it all day. I had just gone to panels, so I went to the show floor, and then as I was on the show floor, I was like, oh yeah, Jerry Duggan has a booth. I should probably go see if he's at it right now. So I went over, and he was packing up, because he wasn't going to be there on Sunday. So as he was packing up, I got to say hi to him, shake his hand, and ask him some questions about Deadpool. Ask him what voice he hears for Deadpool when he writes or reads Deadpool, because I always hear Nolan North, because Nolan North has done so many things where he's the voice of Deadpool. And he was like, I always heard him as having a gravelly voice because of the regeneration and all that. But then once Ryan Reynolds became Deadpool in the movies, then that took it over completely. Whenever I read Deadpool comics now, I always hear Nolan North's voice, but Ryan Reynolds is in the back of my head, just trying to usurp him the entire time. So it's like a conflicting two different voices of Deadpool, which, if you know anything about Deadpool, is very, very appropriate. So that was cool. And then I went to my car and I went home. So anyway, that's going to do it for WonderCon 2019. So to wrap it up, we need to go to the convention board and add the people to it. So that's going to be Joe Starr and Dan Merle and John Bailey and Hal Rudnick from the Screen Junkies and Trisha Hirschberger from the Trisha Hirschbergers and Jerry Duggan from Marvel Comics. So let's go to the board. You will also notice that on the board there, in the 4th spot, there is a question mark. Now, the 5 that are on there are all of the Southern California, well, LA area conventions that I generally go to every year, or generally try to go to every year. And then the question mark, last year it was San Diego Comic-Con. The year before, it was TwitchCon. TwitchCon this year is in San Diego as well, in September. So I'm not sure if I'm going to go to either one of those, but if I do go to either one of those, that's what that spot will be. It's actually over here. I don't know why I keep pointing over here. It's over here. Yeah, San Diego Comic-Con is in July, and then TwitchCon is in September at the San Diego Convention Center. So we'll see if I go to either of those. I have not decided yet if I'm going to. Hopefully by the time Long Beach Comic-Con and Kamikaze come around this year, I'm not as exhausted as I was last year, where I just ended up not going to either of them. So let me know in the comments down below, did you have any other stuff that you wanted to say about WonderCon? Because no one did last week. I'm not surprised, really. Have you gone to WonderCon before? Is there a comic book convention that you love going to that is in the Los Angeles area that you'd like me to know about that I could go to? That'd be great. Maybe that could fill the question mark over here. There is one in Ontario, California that is coming up that seems kind of interesting, that maybe that will become the new one, but we shall see. Ontario is far enough away that it's a bit of a hassle to get to, but not far enough away to that I would have to stay overnight. There is a convention coming up in Denver really soon, which is where I'm from, that the Critical Role cast is going to be at. I kind of wish I was going to that one, but that's most likely not going to happen. Anyway, comments down below, conventions, stuff, all that. Let me know about it. And while you're down there, if you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button. And if you'd like to see more of the crazy crap that goes on around here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And if you'd like to help support the crazy crap that goes on around here, go ahead and hit up my Patreon. Link is in the description. And with that, have a good however long it is until you watch my next video.